also thanks for showing up.
Yeah, maybe really quick introduction about us. We are local consultancy here in Turku. So yeah, we are residing here in Verstas. There's now 9 of us. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And maybe another mention about Tech Ventures itself as a sort of separate kind of event. So like all good things, it started with beer. We were in Poland, and yeah, we all like this documentary TV series called Doc Ventures. So we decided maybe we should have Tech Ventures, which is essentially the same thing, but just let's watch tech videos and discuss them after that. So we started that kind of event, and it has been changing quite a bit as of late, and here we are now talking about stuff. Right, so initially we had this topic of from prototype to an app or something, but now it's making decisions in a React Native startup. So the title of this talk has changed a bit. Maybe the reason for that is that because this is a startup and it really is still in very beginning phases, we had to make a lot of decisions. So we thought that let's keep that sort of as a subject for this talk. So yeah, this is our journey.
Yeah, I guess the naming went sort of like, let's just put something in here and then we'll fix it later. And now the code's in production, so it never happens, right? All right, so the story starts here, about 20 minutes north from Turku, a municipality called Rusko and the home of Opeko Oy. But behind Opeko there is also another company called Pläkkipelti. This is a 30-year-old company making roofs. So it's in the roofing business. And during their history, they have run into trouble finding proper roofers. So the education side hasn't been producing enough quality people to work on the business. And so around 10 years ago, they founded Opeko, which is essentially an educational company for the roofing business. So it's producing workers for Pläkkipelti and other companies working in the same field. They're passionate about their business, and it was about a year ago when they invited us to sort of help them with a problem they discovered. To get the basics straight, here's how the sort of apprenticeship model in vocational studies works. So initially you do some paperwork, you do contracts with the school, the company you're going to be working, or the student's going to be working at. And first the student goes to school. They do enough studying so that they're ready to go into real work and finish their degree by working with real life tasks and basically just working. In the end, they graduate if all has gone well. So what they had noticed, since in this field there's basically 3 operators per student. There's the apprenticeship office, then there's the school and the workplace. And what Opeko had noticed was that basically for every graduating student, all the paperwork, documentation of the tasks that have been done, the bookkeeping and the paperwork, everything is tripled. So all of these operators have their own set of paperwork they do, and all the documentation is done 3 times. Basically, this was the sort of problem they wanted us to help them with and optimize the whole process a bit.
Yeah, so we got really excited. Let's take this problem, and we took our amazing design skills and we went to the whiteboard and drew a bunch of cool mobile UX with transitions and cool stuff. Then we went to Proto.io and ended up with something like this. So essentially, this is what you're seeing here is a to-do app or task list for one particular degree. And the idea here was that you would, because they emphasized sort of the school side of things, the learning of things, that before a student would start actually sort of completing a task, they would watch some instructional video about it. And as they had made nice videos about sort of the mallisuoritus on how to do these things, we had this idea that maybe the student could watch this before they actually complete anything. So this is an example of doing some roofy thingy. I don't know what it is. And then after you had watched the video, you would go and actually start doing something. So you would add photo here I'm doing something, and another photo of your progress. And then you would send this sort of task to be assessed or to be reviewed. We also had some ideas on like how to filter tasks that are viewed here, and so on. And essentially we presented this idea to the Opego guys, and they got really excited. That, let's build it all. We love it all. We want the videos and stuff, everything.
Yeah, and obviously at this point we were really excited as well. We said, yeah, sure, we really want to do it, but there was just one problem. We couldn't really figure out how the complete process worked. Like, where does the money come in? What's the business for you guys? Because we wanted to get cracking with the software side, but it didn't really make sense to us. So we went back to them and we told us that, could you please elaborate a bit and teach us on how this business works for your side? So how are you going to make money of this new, beautiful, grand software? So we sat down with them, went through basically the whole process of apprenticeship type vocational studies and educating people in that way. We learned a lot, spent a lot of time at their office as well, a lot of drawing on the boards. And in the end, I think it was the same trip that we founded Tech Ventures on, that we also were doing some calculations for this project. And in the end, we thought that, okay, I think now we understand the basics well enough that we can actually formulate the problem and it makes sense to solve it. So we simpled down the problem a bit. So the essential bits are that there's communication between the student and the school. There's also communication between the student and the workplace. These two need to talk. Everyone needs to talk to the apprenticeship office. Well, workplace has internal communication, school has internal communications. You pretty much get the picture, and all of these links are basically one-on-one, so a lot of wasted communication is created, and no one's got basically the big picture here. So what we wanted to do to solve this problem was basically to introduce them WhatsApp. But we wanted to add some additional features, including the possibility to accept a task being done, deny or decline the task, and also do a moderate level of reporting that was needed in order for the student to graduate. And in this way, everyone could see the same situation and have a good view of the sort of overall situation where the student is going, how much has been done, what's missing, and so on.
Right, so then we went back to the drawing board and ended up with the first sort of working prototype. So it looks a lot simpler. This is the very first UX on the iOS side. The idea was basically the same, but we just wanted to highlight like now accomplishing one task would be more like what shall be like. So we went actually right here in electricity, we went to the basement and we took some epic photos of some things to, I don't know, to move. And the idea is that the student first documents what they're about to do, and then to make sure who is actually doing the work, we would take another picture so that, okay, it's actually this guy who is moving some plates. And yeah, you could also comment like you could do in WhatsApp what you're about to do. So that was basically it. That was our first sort of prototype, which we went back and showed them. So we went to visit Rusko again. We saw their sort of student facilities and asked for feedback, asked more questions, and also just wanted to try it in real production in a way. So we were actually quite lucky to get, it only took us 1.5 weeks to get the students sort of on board after starting to write some code. So obviously when you're using end users, you always get the actual good feedback, so that was really helpful for us. So this is what it looks like nowadays. If you're a teacher, essentially you have a list of students. And if you navigate to one individual student, you will see basically the same list as before, the tasks that are grouped together based on sort of their higher grouping in a way. And yeah, the student can see quickly on like what's the current progress of that degree. And here the teacher is navigating to one task that something has been done. And because this is a sort of base level studies in like perustutkinto in Finnish, the grading here goes from 1 to 5. So the teacher will grade the student with the grade of 5. And that's basically it. Then the student gets notified and can continue on forwards. And maybe another thing to mention, this is the iOS side here. We asked the students to take a lot of pictures. That was basically our only sort of advice. And just by asking that, the teachers actually came back to us and said that that was really good advice because they noticed that they could react to small details really quickly. So because the teachers get push notifications immediately, they can review the progress easily, and especially like safety related things were handled immediately. So that was good advice there.
Yeah, jumping onto the tech side, we're not going to be going too deep here. So if you have any questions, just ask us after the presentation, and we'll also be hanging around after the second presentation. So just come up to us and ask away if there's something you want to know. Basically, we didn't want to go through the whole sort of package JSON of the project, but here's some highlights we wanted to pick up. First of all, the application is based on React Native. In case you're not familiar, that's a Facebook project. Basically, the idea is that you write JavaScript elements, much like in the web React, and those are then transformed into native components. So you can write or basically create native apps with JavaScript. It produces apps for Android and iOS both. I'm not sure what the situation is on the Windows Phone side at the moment. There was a project for that, but it might be dead already. Yeah, Visual Studio Code, basically our editor of choice. No preferences or, I mean, dislikes for others, but that's the one we've been using. It's been going forward really fast, a lot of good plugins, and we both love it. Redux, really good state management. I'm assuming most of you who have been programming JavaScript by now know of it. Anyways, if you don't, study a bit. It's good. The bottom row basically is tooling for writing JavaScript code and getting rid of the small problems that have been pestering JavaScript development in the recent years. I think the whole level is going up in the sense that you don't really have to worry about writing typos or sort of stupid mistakes anymore. This tooling helps a lot in that. We also had a very limited timeline when doing this project. The project is ongoing, but the time has constantly been limited. So we didn't want to invest time in doing anything that had already been done. So here's some of the cloud services that we saw that fitted us and which we were using for the project.
So yeah, first of all, Firebase. We don't really have anything bad to say about Firebase, actually. We used it for its real-time capabilities. It's really useful for like chatty applications. Maybe the one thing to mention here is that sort of our Redux state handling and like architecture decisions were based on the fact that our domain was like event sourced. So we used a lot of events. And so anything that happened within the application was an event, and it was stored in Firebase. And yeah, worked nicely for us.
Then LogDNA. We've actually only been using LogDNA for a few months. Last spring, we were using a service called Log Entries. We don't really have anything that bad to say about it, but we just didn't really like the user interface and the capabilities there. So we switched, and LogDNA has been really good. It provides a lot of good filtering options. It a lot of ingestion options, so you can either post or you can have apps basically reading the file system and pushing everything here. So a lot of good tools come with it. So it's very easy to use, and I guess you're supposed to say powerful here, but that's a good term for describing it. We've been liking it so far.
Then for photos, we actually used LogDNA, which is essentially a front for Amazon S3, as far as we now understand. But basically, the reason why we picked LogDNA was that it has nice SDKs for React Native also. And if you look at the URL on the bottom, you can do cool things by providing different URI parameters, like for example creating a thumbnail of the face of the photo and such stuff like that. So that was cool.
OneSignal is a push notification service. I guess the main thing to say about the push notification business these days is that there's a lot of competition there. So you can basically pick any service you want. They're most likely going to be free with unlimited push notifications. So whatever fits your need. For us, it was OneSignal. It was very easy to take into use, and yeah, we've had no problems with it. This was on the sort of border of our application. It filled its sort of duties very well. So just wanted to mention it here.
Then Code Push. Has anyone heard of Code Push by Microsoft? Right? If you're using React Native, basically Code Push allows you to skip the App Store or Play Store review process. So you can basically update your whole bundle of the application as your application is starting up. And we had actually Code Push in use, but then we sort of removed it. No real reason. Other than we feel that actually the review process nowadays is quite quick, even on the iOS side. And one thing to note here is that if you are using React Native, Redux, and then you are thinking about Code Push, there's some tricks there if your schema sort of changes, so your data. So if you have multiple versions and you're trying to push new bundle of your whole JavaScript from the cloud, you might enter some issues there. That's something to keep in mind. And lastly, BoxKnack or Sentry, they are essentially doing the same thing. So when you're doing React Native, their error reporting is quite important thing. And one thing we only recently have been starting to get into use, something we should have done maybe earlier, is a separate cloud service for only handling the errors themselves. And the reasoning there is that with React Native, you have sort of sources of exceptions can be from the native side or the JavaScript thread itself. So you should put a lot of effort into that to sort of tie those two things together with source maps and things like that. So these services help with handling errors correctly.
Yeah, a few words about marketing. We basically wanted to do everything ourselves. Well, it's fun. It's fun to play around with this stuff. So we started with playing around with some colors, with some typography, and spent only a little time, but spent some time on trying to figure out a logo or icon for our app. And we actually went with the ones on the bottom for last spring. And during the summer, we noticed that if we want to continue doing everything ourselves, we're basically going to be wasting a lot of potential development time. So we contacted a local marketing agency and started working with them so that we basically threw them some ideas. They would give us back some drafts, and then we'd bounce these ideas back and forth a couple of times. And usually it's been turning up really good results. So just in case you run into this kind of situation, it's pretty good to sort of use some external help there. Helped us a lot.
And one thing it also helps you with is that we got the logo, for example, that you can see here from the marketing agency, so then we could continue with sketching like t-shirts and stuff. So yeah, you can sort of continue doing your stuff on your own as well. And also when it comes to events, we were lucky enough to visit the local schools here in Turku, as well as in Lokomo there was this conference recently. We were all there presenting, and we were also got a mention from Turun Ammatti-instituutti, which is one of the biggest vocational schools here in Turku, and they also mentioned our cooperation with them and with Meyer, so that was really cool. So yeah, this is basically the usage of EduKit right now. These are all the photos that I've been taking around Finland. The reasoning here is that, or the reason is basically the roofing business, because they are all over in Finland, so we get nice feedback from different environments.
Okay, couple of takeaways. First of all, know the sort of worth, so know your business case. At the end of the day, our job is to produce value to the end customer. And their responsibility basically is to turn that value into usually money or something that can be turned into money in the future. But it's not only the customer's responsibility to know that value chain and understand it. It's also our job. So spend some time and get to know your domain and understand the concepts that are behind there. Because if you don't and you get into a project just for the money, and you end up realizing after like 4, 5, 6 months that this isn't actually producing anything, we're just wasting money here, no one is going to be walking away from that project happy. It's going to be a lot of disappointments. So keep that in mind and spend some time on understanding what you're actually working towards.
Right, so the next point is prioritization. So this is a timeline of things that sort of happened within this startup. As you can see in the beginning, we did a lot of this sort of questioning and understanding, as Henka was mentioning. And because we also had our sort of day jobs in a way, we had quite a lot of constraints when it comes to actual development. So we only spent 4 weeks in the beginning of this year, and then 1 week in the spring. And because of these time constraints, it really forced us to do the prioritization. It's actually quite, it can take a toll on you, but we felt like looking back now, it's actually really helpful. So you say sort of no to the right things. So yeah, prioritization is important.
Yeah, if you're working with UX and UI, you probably know this takeaway better than I do. I have sort of a nature when I'm doing development that I want to implement too many features. So just try to strive away from that. Keep things simple. It's going to be a lot usable. But also in this project, we were working against some legal boundaries. And the first idea when we were coming to people in this field was that, well, getting a degree is pretty complicated. The paperwork has a lot of details and there's a lot of paperwork in it. So we wanted to sort of work against or with the preconception that can we make this process simpler? And we studied the law as far as it sort of touches our base of apprenticeship type studying. And basically tried to get away with the bare minimum. And I think we succeeded. We've been getting a lot of good feedback saying that we didn't really know that it could be so simple to get a degree in this system. So spend effort here as well. Things aren't necessarily as complex as they're usually meant to seem like.
All right, so the last point we wanted to make is sort of technical in nature. So it relates to NPM and Yarn packages in a way. If you go and you search for React Native and navigation in like the Yarn package library, you end up with 158 packages. So basically the point here is that you have to make a lot of decisions. And because of our timeline and the actual writing of code was so limited in time, we had to make a lot of these decisions. And maybe something we noticed that we wanted to sort of bring up here is we came up with this amazing graph. On the x-axis you have time spent, and on the y-axis you have the cost of making a decision. So if we take an example of the React Native navigation and choosing that, we feel like that's a highly dependent component or NPM package in a way. So because it's sort of trickled down in both the native code, like Objective-C or Java, as well as the JavaScript code. So it's all over the place. And it's also in the configuration and so on. So it actually makes sense to spend some time making that decision. Because if you make it quickly, it might end up costing you. On the other hand, if you have some NPM packages that are easy to swap, so they're like utilities or something that's just, I don't know, time-related thing, maybe it's not a good idea to spend too much time on it, because then you end up second-guessing yourself. So the point here is that there's actually like multiple types of cost. There's obviously cost of time. I mean, cost is time, money, but there's also the cost of what sort of cognitive drain. And this is something we felt quite a bit. So, for example, this is a screenshot from 2 days ago. And apparently there's a new library for working with dates and times in JavaScript, and it's now the best. So we actually run into this issue multiple times. So we spent time picking up some packets, and then we did make a decision. And then tomorrow, like the day after, we noticed that there was actually a new package, and it was better. So then what happens is you just end up, my whole life has been made of bad decisions. So yeah, this is Henk after making some decisions.
Not even once.
Yeah. So if you want to hear someone explain this way better than I do, at least, so there's actually a couple talks to recommend here. Dan Abramov had a really nice talk in the site today about this, essentially the cognitive drain, as well as building sort of toolkits instead of huge packaging files. Cheng Lo is another really enthusiastic talker. He was talking about taming the meta language. It's more deeper sense, deep talk, but he had really nice talks about sort of pushing these decisions to the language level, so we wouldn't have to make so many NPM choices in a way. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, any questions? Yeah.
When writing the React Native code for both iOS and Android, I've heard that React Native is kind of learn once, write anywhere, instead of write once, run anywhere. How much, like how many changes did you have to make for it to work on each system?
Yeah, great question. So it is actually surprising. Yeah, I could repeat. So React is often stated as like learn once, write anywhere. And the question was about like how many changes did we have to make, like platform-specific changes we had to make. So I would say it's actually quite high in the 90% of the code that is shared. The parts where you nowadays get into issues is if you, for example, you saw this pinch and zoom component in the image viewer, like stuff like that is really like UX-specific things. Maybe then you might run into writing some Java code or Objective-C code, but actually it's not that bad. It's usually like one class files and so on. So,
and I'd say it's also about decisions, because there will be an alternative for you to sort of not do platform-specific things. But in the case you really want to optimize on something like usability, then you might need to or want to sort of go into the platform side and do some optimization there. But usually you can solve the same problem with sort of a single solution.
I guess if you do that too much, it will start to feel not like a native app and more like a web app. Is that's another another decision that you have to make, I suppose. How much can you implement, outside of native code, even if it's not supported by React Native? Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it goes as far as to being like a web app, but it does take away the sort of natural feeling of it easily.
Yeah, and maybe just one thing to notice that React Native is obviously not the first one to do sort of this type of hybrid apps. We previously had played around with Ionic, for example, that is more about the web, having web inside the browser wrapped in a native app. But I personally feel like React Native is really great, and one of the reasons is the community. So there's so many people, so many packages, and a lot of decisions, but it's also a good thing because it's getting better all the time. And if I had to choose again, I would definitely go with React Native, even knowing the different choices there also.
Yeah. Anything else? Are you guys just thirsty for beer?
One thing. I guess you can hear me without the mic.
You can have this.
As you might know, we're trying to build a conference here in Turku for the next fall. And we have a fan over here. We are making the mock-up site or the promo site, and we need faces of our meetup participants to show the world that we are actually a real meetup and we have real people in Turku. So before you go or after you go to grab the beer, could you please, if you want, stop by the booth over there. We have a nice photographer, Sami, who will take a nice photo of you that we will use in the upcoming website. So raise your hands if you are willing to participate. So we can estimate at least 10 people. Yeah. So feel free to grab the beer and then come to the photo booth. Thanks.
Yeah. Also, one more really quick thing from us. If you liked this and like similar stuff, just contact us. We can go for a lunch. We'll pay, and it's really it's free. It's free. So yeah, just contact us. Thanks.